Very long story short, back in 2012, I had to have a total hysterectomy. So that was removal of my womb, my cervix, and both of my ovaries. And I was 45 at the time. And unfortunately, neither prior to that surgery nor afterwards did any medical healthcare professional explain to me all the potential complexities of being thrust straight into what is called a surgical menopause. So I had no idea. I knew I wasn't going to have any more periods. I knew I might have some hot flushes. So at the time, what I was really focused on was getting well again, getting back to work, getting back to enjoying my life. So I'd heard all the scary stuff about HRT over the, kind of the preceding years, had decided that it was not going to be for me, and I was going to do things the natural way, etc., etc. But nobody told me that at 45, I absolutely should have hormone replacement therapy. So I went on my merry way, left the hospital, was delighted when the results of the tests came through after my surgery to know that I didn't have ovarian cancer, which is why I had the surgery in the first place. I did, however, find out that for 15 or so years, I'd been living with grade 4 endometriosis. I'd been living with a condition called adenomyosis. I had complex cysts on both my ovaries and a huge fibroid. Now, I had approached doctors several times about the horrific abdominal and back pain I used to get on a regular basis, and had never really got anywhere with those consultations. So just went off and got on with it. I did, in fact, get told on one occasion that I wasn't in enough pain. So consequently, having got these good results after my surgery, I was thrilled and thought, right, crack on, get on with life. Unfortunately for me, my menopause symptoms turned out not to be physical, they turned out to be psychological. So as the weeks and months went on, I started to develop a really deep anxiety, a crushing anxiety that meant that I essentially stopped leaving the house. I wouldn't really see anybody apart from my very close family. I wouldn't answer the telephone, and I became so irrational that I wouldn't even open post because I was absolutely sure there would be something horrific in it. I was living in a very dark world. My sleep had fallen apart. I would have panic attacks in the night. It would feel like somebody was sitting on my chest. I would cry most of the time. And my poor husband and mum tried desperately to get me to go back to the doctor, but I was absolutely terrified because I genuinely thought that I was going mad. And this went on for far too long, with me being stubborn and saying that I wouldn't go back because I was genuinely terrified. And we came to a crisis point where I came very close to taking my own life. And I'm very fortunate to have incredibly supportive people around me who got me the help that I needed when I needed it. And when I did sit down in front of a GP, I was very fortunate to sit down in front of a GP who understood why I felt like I felt. And she explained to me that at the time of my surgery, my estrogen level had essentially been depleted hugely. And I absolutely should have been counselled to have HRT prior to my surgery. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. I'm sad to tell you that I speak to women on a regular basis, even today, that that's happening to. And once I did start to feel a little bit better, initially I was very relieved because I'd been living in this very dark place. But then I started to feel really angry because I thought, look what nearly happened to me because of a lack of the right information and support. I wonder if I was really unlucky, or I wonder if that might have happened to other people too. So I did what we all do, and I turned to the internet and started to look on, at the time, it was actually forums rather than things like Instagram back in 2012, 2013. And I started to look at forums, and I was coming across people who were saying, please help me, I think I'm going mad. I don't understand who I am anymore. I feel like I've lost myself. I don't think I can do my job anymore, etc., etc. And I remember on one particular occasion turning to my husband and saying, this just cannot be right. We're talking about half the population here. How is it right that so much needless suffering is allowed to go on? If I ever feel like me again, I'm going to make damn sure that I do something to change it. And that's really how I get to be sitting in front of you. So it took me a couple of years to feel like myself. And then in 2015, I started menopause support. And initially, that was just me supporting women one-to-one. It very quickly became clear that that was not really going to work because the demand was absolutely overwhelming. So I started a Facebook support community where we now support around 24,000 women. I also expanded menopause support and made it a not-for-profit community interest company. So there's now a couple more of us. We are tiny, but we have, we have great impact for the size that we are. And then in 2017, I was asked to speak on a TV program. I came out of the studio and my telephone rang, and it was Carolyn Harris. And she said, can you come in and see me? Because I've just seen you talking about menopause on TV. So Carolyn and I met for the first time in 2017. I explained to her the issues that I was hearing time and time again. And then in 2018, I decided that we needed a national campaign. So I launched the Make Menopause Matter campaign. And the reason that I launched it is because it had become really clear to me that there were very key issues around menopause that needed to be addressed. The first of them was the amount of women who were going to see their doctor and being told, it can't be menopause, you're too young. It can't be menopause, you're still having periods. It can't be menopause, etc., etc., etc. Or they were given a blood test over the age of 45, which NICE guidelines absolutely tell us is not the right thing to do. They were sitting there having lots of symptoms and then being told, your blood test says that you're not perimenopausal. So they would go away and suffer for a bit longer. And I thought, why is this happening? So I started to look into it and recognized that there is no mandatory module of training for GPs. So not all medical students are taught about menopause, and not all GPs are taught about menopause. So that's a big issue when we're talking about half of the population. So the first aim is mandatory training for all GPs. The second is to have guidance and support in every workplace. And I very much feel that policy in the workplace is potentially useful if it's individualized. However, there's no point having policy if there is no culture within the organization to support menopause. We have to start with support. That's the key. The thing that everybody tells me is, if I know there is support there, that makes an enormous difference. So it's guidance in the workplace. And then the third was to have menopause included in the RSE curriculum in schools. The reason for that is none of us ever learn anything about menopause. So the key to that is to teach the very basics to young people, because they will grow up to experience menopause, to have partners who experience menopause, to have family members and friends, and also to have colleagues who experience menopause. So it's the ideal way. What we need to do is, it's no point just looking at the problems. We need to look at what the solutions are. So they were the three aims. And I'm delighted to say that in 2019, less than a year after we launched, the education secretary at the time agreed that it would be added to the RSE curriculum in England. Of course, we want to see that throughout the UK. It was actually added in September 2020. but these things don't happen overnight. It's going to take time for it to embed into the curriculum and for the resources to be available for teachers to be able to feel confident to teach the subject. So they're our aims, but essentially what we really need to do is doing something like this is so important, because Carolyn and I sharing information with you and everybody else that's on the panel will mean that you will then go away and share that information. And this is the most effective thing. You know, social media has been absolutely brilliant for helping to share information. So many women have got their information from social media. I also think it's really important to recognise that we talk about menopause in relation to women, but it's also important to recognise that you will have transgender and non-binary friends, colleagues, and family members who could also experience menopause. So it has to be a wider conversation too. So how are we going to achieve those aims? Well, as Carolyn said, within the Commons, there is only so much that can be done. Members like Carolyn and her colleagues can absolutely bring in organisations and speak to them and put pressure on them to change things. But ultimately, the point of a campaign like the Make Menopause Matter campaign is for grassroots members of the community, for all of us to be able to sign and share that petition, to raise our voices. And the more we collectively raise our voices together to highlight these issues, the better things will be. Because for me, I cannot contemplate 10, 20 years down the line when so many are suffering in silence the way that they are today. We get the messages. I have the most fantastic office manager, and it is very often that she will message me during the day to tell me that she's been in tears because of the kind of emails that Carolyn was talking about that we all receive. As I said, we support about 24,000 women on our support group, and some of the things that we hear are absolutely heartbreaking. The breakdown of relationships, the amount of jobs that are left, the amount of nurses that the NHS loses, the amount of police women that the police force loses, the amount of teachers who are leaving, and all these people who have responsibility for somebody else in their career feel a huge impact. So it is so important that we do keep raising this, and we're raising it with the media, obviously working with MPs like Carolyn in the House. But I would really, sort of ask all of you, please do share everything you learned tonight. Go and sign and share that campaign. And just let's all make sure that we are the generation to make menopause matter.